when you looked up into it, it had a hole in the block. The lower half of the connecting rod was hanging out of it, and you could see the underside of the piston with the top half of the connecting rod hanging out. The first Porsche I ever drove or experienced was a beat up old 914 that Dad bought when I was like 14 years old. And it was the first one I drove. And even though it was so abused with the rusted center and the door would fly open and everything else, the handling, the way that thing felt was just incredible. And it really started kind of my love for Porsches at that point. You know, having gone from that, and then I ended up with a 944 coupe. It was an 83, I think. And it was like the Alpine White. And it wasn't a turbo. It wasn't terribly fast, but it just handled so amazingly, you know, and with the Tran in the back and engine up front, it was just, when I spun out of control, and yes, that happened, it just slid to a perfect slide. It didn't do donuts or anything. And then the 968 Cabriolet I had, that was, you know, the only convertible. The guard's red, bright color, and I put the chrome turbo twist rims on it and stuff. And the clutch was a lot heavier in it, but it had a lot more power too, right? And just a hell of a fun car to drive. And that was the first one I ever drove that it could make the CD player skip when you dump the clutch. It had that much acceleration. And then when I got rid of the 968, it was to get the 993 Turbo, the Gray Ghost. It was a silver, you know, 96, black interior, and I just loved that car. And it was, you know, 400 horsepower back then was a ton of power, right? And in an all-wheel drive chassis, it just handled like on rails. Like, you understand what they mean when they say that, driving that car. And when you'd floor it, it's like four paws grabbing instead of just the fishtail. Was without one for a long time, and then a few years ago I got this 2014 Turbo S, and I've installed the FLIR in it. It's already got all the radar mounted in the mirror and everything, and you know, I just put some black HRE wheels on it and stuff. And you know, I've loved all the cars. It's hard to really compare some of them because I love this thing I've got right now. I mean, 560 horse and all-wheel drive and a dual clutch that I resisted a little bit, but it's just so fast though, and the way it drives. But there's something about that 993 with that whale tail on the haunches, and even though the German engineers hate it because they're all aerodynamic band-aids, there's just something about that look that's just gorgeous. But you know, if there was one that something was going to happen to, it was that white 944. It just, you know, it was so much fun to drive and so good, but I just, at that time of life, had a little bit of bad luck with it, I guess. Shortly after moving to San Antonio, I had a white 944 Porsche, and cruising off, got on the exit ramp, and instead of slowing down, yes, I probably accelerated as I got off of it. And there's these frontage roads in San Antonio, in Texas. And a woman was in this middle lane, and just as I'm ripping off, at the last second, she comes over with no blinker right in front of me. I had to go into the grass. I chopped off a one-way sign so hard that it stamped the ONE into my hood, ruined the front end. I looked over at her, and as I'm in the grass, she looks over at me and just keeps on cruising. And so I had to take it in and get it repaired, you know, and it was an older car, so they wanted to total it at first, and I had to kind of work with them to find some used parts, you know, because I didn't want to lose the car. But while it was in the shop, I happened to find another little car dealer around the corner, and they had a red 968 Cabriolet sitting there, and I just upgraded from the house I was renting with one stall to a two-stall garage. And I saw that 968 and took it for a test drive, and I was like, oh, that's nice. So instead of just waiting for one car to get fixed, I bought another one so then I could have the two of them. But, you know, as a car and bike guy, that was kind of like, had the world by the balls, right? Like, you could go out in the morning, like, you want to take the coupe, don't want to take the convertible, maybe the Harley today. And that's just kind of what we work for sometimes, I guess, is enjoying those. It was fixed, and then it was probably another actually in a year or two, I was driving in some really deep water. Like in Texas, when it rains, it just dumps, right? And so I was driving to work, and all of a sudden all the lights went up, and I'm like, uh-oh. And as I got out, you could see an oil sheen coming behind it, you know. And what happened is the 944s have their air intake on the inside wheel well, and it got water in there, and it hydrolocked the engine. And at the dealer, we looked up at it. I'd never seen this to this level before. I've seen bent rods, but I'd never seen a broken rod. And when you looked up into it, it had a hole in the block. The lower half of the connecting rod was hanging out of it, and you could see the underside of the piston with the top half of the connecting rod hanging out. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So we did have to total it at that point. It was just beyond saving it, unfortunately. But the only other thing that really happened to it was leaving the bar one night, driving around by a construction area. What they'd done is they had a 90-degree cut in the concrete with just a drop right there. And it used to be a nice sloping curve entrance ramp. It wasn't that way anymore. It had this cutout, and when I went through it, I knocked out both wheels. One of them went flat. I changed that on the road, made it home, but then when I got it checked, both wheels were trashed. And they weren't the stock ones. They were a set of the chrome Borbette rims from years ago. That's like an 83 car, I guess. And the guy's like, look, I've got one of each in existence. Like, if you lose these, it's it. And you're like, give me those. But he goes, I got one left of the rear ones. Do you want it? I'm like, nah, I'll roll the dice. And then of course it totaled it. And that was a rough weekend. So I had the more vehicles we have, the more problems we have, right? The 944 was blown up. I watched it get hauled away on a trailer with green and brown running out the back of it. Then I went to take my 968 to go get parts for the Harley, because the Harley was all torn apart, which was standard for Harley, right? And as I drove that to go get parts, on the way back, the clutch line blew on it. It's a $140 part, but it's just, now you have to change the clutch line. So 944 is dead, 968 is disabled, Harley's still in pieces in the garage. And I said, hey, at least nothing else can go wrong. I went to mow lawn and the wheel fell off the mower, threw the thing across the yard. I'm like, time to drink. I'm done with this shit today. I've had enough. Never tempt fate. My garage right now, I have the Cadillac CTS-V Coupe, which I love that car too. It's the only new car I ever bought, actually. I got, a great deal on it, and 556 horsepower, supercharged V8, standard transmission, all black everywhere, just a hell of a good car. And the comfort, and for being 4,300 pounds, the way that thing goes around, I had it in the Rocky Mountains, and the way that thing handles for being a big old pig is pretty amazing, really, for what that is. And actually, when you look at that versus the Turbo S, if I'm doing in the 150 plus range out on the back roads, the Cat is actually a lot smoother. It surprised me what a difference it is. I realize the Porsche is lighter, but it's got the spoilers and all the ground effects and stuff, but that Cat is just smooth as glass doing those kind of speeds. They're very different animals. And then, I have like the two crotch rockets parked between them. I've got my chopper up in the front. And the car I drive the most is a 2014 Volkswagen TDI wagon, the dog's car, because covered with dog hair, it's so practical, it's good mileage. And when Volkswagen paid me back for hurting the polar bears with their emission stuff, it's like, sure, I'll take thousands of dollars for this car that's already got 100 and some thousand miles. And I've just been driving, I can haul a motorcycle on a trailer or whatever I need to do with it.
We'd like to thank the Ticket Clinic for supporting VINwiki this month. When you get a ticket, no matter where it happens, you're risking points on your license, costly fines, insurance premium increases, and risks of suspension or jail time. So it's more important than ever to have great representation. The Ticket Clinic is a nationwide law firm that can help you fight a ticket no matter where you get it. It's easier than ever to start a relationship with them. You'll just take your ticket, snap a picture of it, and text that picture to 305-305. You can also reach them at the link in the description below to thank them for their support of VINwiki and fight your ticket with the Ticket Clinic.